Welcome back, everyone. This is Fred with Fred's Fine Automobiles. Today we will be doing a basic tune-up on my 96 V6 Camry Wagon. I'll be changing the oil, air filter, doing a transmission drain and fill, cleaning the MAF, replacing its gasket and the connector, and replacing the PCV valve and crankcase ventilation hoses. Let's get started. Here's the parts we'll be using. So we'll start with our engine oil. Let's first check and see what we're looking like. So, we're at an okay level there. It honestly looks pretty clean. Not too bad. Take a look inside the valve cover. Okay, so it's pretty dirty. These engines have been known to sludge, but honestly, a little over exaggerated. It's normally just due to poor maintenance, not changing the PCV valve, not changing the hoses, not changing the oil often enough. So hopefully we can clear some of that carbon buildup out. Set the parking brake, chock your wheels, and we're going to jack up from the front subframe. Right in the middle there's a point for the jack. Now that we have a little more clearance, we'll crack the 14mm drain bolt. So this gasket that was on there looks pretty horrible. As you can tell, it's like warped, it's bent all the way around. Look at that. Would not be surprised if that was leaking. So glad we're replacing that. Now we'll lower the vehicle again to let it drain fully. An anonymous neighbor left this on my garage door. They must have seen me working on it and wanted to help out the effort. It's called a tourney filter, made in Japan. So we're gonna try to remove the oil filter with it. Alright, so tourney filter didn't work so well, but it's a thought that counts. We're gonna go back to my preferred favorite, this OEM Tools one. Clean off the surface a little bit. Pretty dirty. Try not to get anything in the engine. No promises. Our new oil filter. A little bit extra oil on it. Get it hand tight. Almost all the oil is drained, so we'll jack the car back up. And it's not quite done yet, so we'll move on to some other things. To remove the number 2 crankcase ventilation hose, there are 2 hose clamps. And we might as well get rid of that one as well. These are hose clamp pliers for this end. Remove these clips fully so I can get a better grip on the hose while I try to twist it off. Just don't want to break the intake side rubber. There we go. Clean this up a little bit with the Scotch-Brite pad.
May or may not have been mouse poop right there.
Hit it with the wire brush too. All right, and then we'll install our new ventilation hose with 2 new clips. This one was good enough to save. Always try to position them in the same indentations if you're reusing any hoses at all. All right, now we're moving on to our primary PCV valve hose and PCV valve. There's 2 clips, one on this side and one on this side. You can get these by hand actually. And here's what it looks like. Also pretty cracked. We'll reuse the clips from that. Now remove the valve itself. All right, looks like I broke it off in there. We're gonna try prying up with our screwdriver with electrical tape on it. slowly coming out. And there it is. Yeah, look at that. I'll just take the grommet out. Wow, okay, that was the gnarliest PCV grommet removal I've ever done, but I'm pretty confident I got all of it out. We'll find out. Clean it up a little bit. Install our new grommet. Install the new valve. And our new hose. PCV valve and hose are done, so we're going to go back and reinstall our oil drain plug and fill it up. Torque spec is 27 foot-pounds. And takes 5 quarts even with a filter change. And clean this up a little bit with the Scotch-Brite pad. And put on a new oil cap. While we're at it, we'll replace this old original radiator cap and clean up the outlet because it's definitely been leaking. Now we're gonna move on to the transmission fluid. So, definitely full. Color, I would say, it's a little bit concerning. It's dark for sure, but not black. Definitely want a little bit more of a redder color in there. Go ahead and lower the vehicle now. All right, get your drain pan in position and we'll crack the transmission drain plug with our 10mm hex. While we wait for that to drain, we're going to move on to replacing our air filter, cleaning the MAF, and replacing the gasket and repinning the connector. Unclip the 4 clips. Move our accelerator cable from the holder. Loosen the 10mm air intake clamp. Disconnect your MAF connector, which I already broke. Then lift the whole airbox up. And wiggle the intake off. Here's the old air filter. Pretty bad. Just going to take the intake box out, 3 10mm bolts. Remove these 2 10mm bolts. And it should pull right out. And there's your MAF. All right, and then we'll take our CRC MAF sensor cleaner. We're gonna spray it into there. That's where the sensor is. And then we'll let it drain out. All right, we've let it dry for a little bit. Now I'm going to replace the gasket. Here's a new one. All right, now I'm gonna replace these rusty clips on the airbox. And to do that, put them in this kind of position, all the way this way in. you're going to push them down. And eventually it'll break free. And you pull outwards. And there it goes. Then to put it on, it's just the reverse. Get it right over that ridge. Work it inwards. Then pull up. All right, we'll reinstall our lower airbox. Replacing the bolts with 3 10mm bolts I have laying around. Install our new air filter. Reattach our MAF to the airbox. Now we'll reinstall the upper airbox. Put our accelerator cable back in the holder. Now to depin our broken MAF connector, gonna pull that out. That'll unlock it. And then there is a plastic tab under each of those. So right under the terminal, I don't know if you guys can see that, but take a tool like this. It really helps to have a specific tool for this. And you just stick it right there. Depress the clip. And my preferred method is to either, as I'm pulling the clip down for the terminal, pushing the terminal out to disengage it, or pulling the wire, but often it's going to be way easier to just push the terminal out. You just have to hold it in a very specific way to do that. So that's one. Oh, and always make sure to take a picture of the wires before you start depinning stuff. So you don't have to look it up after the fact. Alright, so I have my terminals in the order they'll be going into the connector. Red, black, brown, blue, black, red, brown, tan. Take our new housing. Here's the part number. For some reason, they're now white, which is interesting. And you're gonna want the smooth side of the terminal facing up towards the clip right here. You're gonna want every single one of them to click individually. This one. Two. Three. Four. And 5. Then you just push the lock in, and that's done. We can plug it in. Tighten our intake clamp. Alright, here's what our transmission fluid looks like. Not really what you want to see. Fairly dark. So glad I'm doing a drain and fill. Now we can reinstall our drain plug and washer. Torque spec is 36 foot-pounds. So because exactly 3.7 liters of fluid came out, that's the same amount I'm putting in. I'm using Max Life ATF because I've seen a lot of people have good results with it. The other fluid you could use would be the Toyota fluid, which is type 4. What I'm going to do is fill it up. I'm going to jack up the car so it's level, and then I'll leave it overnight, and in the morning check the dipstick, make sure our level is good before I start it. The spec is 3.5 liters. I'm putting in the same amount because I don't think this transmission was ever serviced. I have no reason to believe that it was overfilled at some point. And the front of the car is lower than level currently. So it makes sense that it would be, you know, a slight amount more fluid that comes out. I came out in the morning with the vehicle level and cold, and it was still very overfilled. So what I did was just remove the drain plug, let it drain for 5 or 6 seconds, then put it back into a trickle until it was at the top of the cold mark. So the total amount that came out was 1.7 liters. So I originally took out and added 3.7 liters. So that's only adding back 2 liters. So it must have been overfilled at some point, but you really should go by what the dipstick says at cold, at level, then get the engine running and add until it's at the correct hot marks. So here's our current transmission fluid level. This is with the vehicle completely level and cold. We're at the top end of the cold mark there. So that is correct. And here's the fluid level, not in the level position. So this would be just the stock 30-year-old suspension position. As you can see, it's to the bottom of the hot when it was at the top of the cold. So now that we've gone through a couple heat cycles and the engine is completely cold, fluid has distributed through the transmission more. That's our line at stock height. So now we're going to drive the car around, and what we're shooting for is for it to be in this range when hot. And here's the level at hot after driving, so we are going to have to add fluid again to get back up to the hot mark. I ended up having to add roughly 3/4 of a quart back into the system. So I've learned that the dipstick on these is pretty fickle, so if I were to do this again and the transmission had never been serviced, I would probably just underfill it by 1/2 to 1 quart, then not even worry about trying to get the cold level close and just drive the vehicle and get it up to temperature so the fluid is properly distributed throughout the transmission. And from there, add fluid as needed, but you're going to waste a lot of time like me if you try to get the cold level set without even driving the vehicle at all. With that being said, I still do think that you should shoot for the top end of the hot mark, just due to the way that these transmissions sit on the chassis and the not level nature of them. Last but definitely not least, while I had the engine running checking my transmission fluid, I noticed that the water seal plate on the front of the block was leaking pretty heavily. So we're going to take care of that before we drive this car anymore. So this is the plate that's leaking. It's two 12mm bolts. Top one's fairly easy. Got a ratchet with a 6-inch extension. And look at that. Stud came right out. All right, we don't have another choice. We got to remove our oil filter in order to gain access. That one I did just get the nut off, thankfully. Okay, so here's our old water seal cap cover. The FIPG goes in the groove and then under the holes right here. So we're just going to clean this up. I'm going to take some 3M adhesive cleaner, make sure it's extremely clean. Alright, I think that'll do. Alright guys, so I finally got the stud that I need for the water seal plate. It's a hex lobular stud. It takes an E7 socket. Could not find the torque spec for it, but I'm gonna copy the 2GR torque spec of 7 foot-pounds. I am gonna put a little bit of thread locker on this stud. off, make sure it's clean again. Alright, and next we're going to use our super long life coolant FIPG to reseal the plate. We're just going to do a bead in the groove, around where this bolt hole goes, groove, around where the bolt hole is. It calls for a 3 to 5 millimeter bead. Alright, so it's roughly that big. So, just cut it off right there. Alright, and you have to install this within 5 minutes. Actually, you have to use it in 3 minutes, as my helper has reminded me. Alright, didn't have space to show myself installing those, but torque spec is 13 foot-pounds. Alright, so we got the plate back on. Now we'll just screw our oil filter on and wait overnight for the FIPG to set before I fill up the coolant again. Alright, so we've let the FIPG set for about 15 hours now. The spec is 12 hours for the coolant specific FIPG, 103, the oil one, is 24 hours. So now we're just going to fill up our system and bleed it. I'm using Toyota 5050 Super Long Life Pink Coolant. bleed the system, I just get it up to temperature, add fluid until it doesn't go down anymore, and wait until no bubbles come up for 5 seconds or so. So it looks like we've resolved our coolant leak. We now have a pretty big leak from the exhaust downpipe, which we'll be dealing with at a later date. But that about wraps this one up. So next we'll be doing power steering, brakes, knock sensors, and eventually timing belt and water pump. Thanks for watching, guys.